Hey everybody, in this video today I'm going to show you all of the tools and equipment that we use when we do tree work here at Ironwood. Right now it's raining outside, so it's a good inside day to clean things up and make sure everything is ready to go for our next time out. So stay tuned. So first thing I'll do is I'll go through the equipment that I wear to protect myself. Most important, the helmet. This one is made out of aluminum, which I like better than the plastic just because I feel like it will be stronger. It's really comfortable, has a chin strap to stay on my head, and also has the adjustable tightening adjuster for the back of my head. But it's actually a really comfortable helmet, and I'm glad that I found this. It's by a brand named Skull Bucket, and yeah, it's something that I will always have for the rest of my life, at least when I'm doing chainsaw work. Another item I use, eye protection. These are called bugs because they look like bug eyes. And these are actually pretty neat. It's actually mesh eye protection, so it's not a lens. What I really like about this is the mesh is small enough to where chips don't fly into my eyes, but also it allows my face to breathe. If you have like goggles or sunglasses or anything like that, it has a tendency to fog up. And the last thing you want to happen to you while you are working with a chainsaw is for you not to be able to see. So the only downside to this, if there's snow on the ground and it's sunny, it's very bright, and the reflection off of these can also make it hard to see. Luckily, whenever that does happen, I'm looking down at the ground or I'm looking down at the tree after I fell it, and I noticed that it doesn't bother me when I do that. But if I'm just out wearing them, looking out, yeah, they pretty much can blind you. But this, just like the helmet, is I will always wear these. They're super comfortable and keeps things out of my eyes. Now I'll go into what I take with me while we do chainsaw work. We always have a bucket. It always has our fuel that we need. You'll always run out of fuel when you do tree work. So it's better to have it with you, so that way I'm not driving back and forth to the shop every time to fill up. It's just a smart way to work. I also have bar and chain oil. What this does is it also goes in the saw, and it keeps the bar and chain lubricated while working. Obviously a chainsaw spins the chain at an extremely high rate. I don't know what rate that is, but it creates friction and heat, and if the saw gets too hot, it can actually snap your chain, and it can also warp the bar on the saw. So you gotta always make sure you have bar oil with you, and you gotta make sure it's keeping the chainsaw lubricated at all times while using it. Another thing we have in the bucket, we use hand sledges. We don't take the big sledgehammer with us. And also along with the sledge is a wedge, a tree wedge. So therefore, if we're cutting a tree and we realize it's not going the way we want it to, we have these on hand and can help us drop the tree where we want to. It also can help us get out of situations where if we have a tree on the ground and we're cutting it up and it pinches the saw, sometimes, well, not sometimes, mostly every time you cut a tree, it's under tension or compression. And therefore, if you're making a cut and all of a sudden that tree shifts or it's releasing energy while you are cutting it apart, sometimes it can essentially grab your saw. And sometimes this wedge, if you're cutting through, that wedge can save you. It can also save the saw being able to pull it out, and you can kind of rethink your strategy. So we have those in the bucket, and then last but not least, we have this nifty tool. I call it a scrinch. because it's essentially a wrench and a screwdriver in one. I don't know if that's a technical term, but it sounds cool to me. And this is basically a tool that you can take your chainsaw apart and make adjustments, you know, if need be. So always important to have this with you. Those are the 5 things that I have in our bucket whenever we go out to do work. We take a Sawzall and we buy limb attachment or limb blades, tree limb blades. You can see it's a really aggressive tooth on there. So, you know, if we're taking a break from using the chainsaw and we have somebody helping us, they can use this to help limb up some trees. It's battery powered. It's just an everyday tool that you can buy at Home Depot or wherever. I like it because it requires 2 hands. You never want to cut something one hand because that has a tendency to maybe cut your other hand. So this is a tool that we like to have with us. And this one's pretty neat. This is like a mini chainsaw, and it is just what it is. It's used for limbing and stuff, not cutting trees down. But what I really like about it is to operate this, you have to use 2 hands. So you have your one hand here and then your trigger hand here, and you can just limb up. So it's a nice safety thing. And we always train our guys on this. We never want somebody using it one-handed because again, you can make a very big mistake that could cost you dearly. So this is a pretty cool, it's a Milwaukee tool. It's very cool. I like how this thing works, but it also has an oil port to keep your chain and bar lubricated just as well. So here's a pretty nifty piece of equipment. This is called a cutter, K-U-T-I-R. And what this is, it's a chain on a rope. I'm not going to unwind it all, but it unwinds and it's a double-sided chain. And what this does is if you have a limb that's really high up in the tree that you would like to limb up and you don't have a pole saw or it's out of your reach, this is a nifty little tool. You pretty much take one end and you tie a weight around it. You throw it up over the limb and then you position this chain over the limb you want to cut. Now, it claims on the box that it's a one-person job, but I'll tell you this much, you need 2 people to work this. Basically, you have a person on each end of the rope, and then you kind of do a cadence thing where you kind of get on a rhythm and you go back and forth. We've used this once and we cut through a limb that was probably about 8 inches in diameter. It was a pretty good sized limb. I would say that's probably what this maximum can cut. It took 45 minutes to cut through the limb, but it was a clean cut, and we wouldn't have been able to do it with anything else. So this does work, but you get a workout, and you definitely need 2 people to do it. Now when we're back in the shop on days like today where it's rainy and everything, and we go to service the chainsaw, we'll go through it, we'll take the cover off of it, we'll basically take the bar and the chain off, and then we'll spend some time, we blow off all the loose debris that we can through the saw, and we use brake cleaner to really clean it off. It gets all the oil and gunk and nasty stuff that's in the nook and crannies that you can't get, and it cleans off really well. When we put it all back together, we like to sharpen the chain, and we use these, they're called 2-in-1 sharpeners by Stihl. They're actually really neat. We have 2 of them because one is a different size than the other, and when I go through the chainsaws, you'll see that we have different size chains for different saws. But now on the chain, you have your cutter, which is your tooth, and then you have your depth gauge. And this tool, when used properly, files both at the same time, and you get a really good sharp chain. When operating a chainsaw, the best safety feature of the saw is a sharp chain. You never want to run a chain that's dull because it wears you out, and if you start to get fatigued, that's when mistakes happen. So always have a sharp chain while doing chainsaw work. But yeah, you pretty much, I mean, there's an arrow that tells you which way to file, the way you have it set up on your chain. I'm not going to go through all the details, but basically it sharpens 2 things at once, and it is a really nice tool to have. Here in front of me, I have our fleet of chainsaws. I prefer the Steel brand just because I feel like that is the best brand. We have 3 different sizes. Our first one is our 171, and it has a 14-inch bar on it. This is really good for trees that are smaller in size. Typically, if we have to limb something up, that's a chainsaw we like to use just because it's really light and it's still pretty powerful. So that's what we use the 171 for. The next one up, we lost the emblem on it, but this is the MS271, also known as a Farm Boss. This has a 16-inch bar on it. This is actually the saw we use the most. It's still relatively light, and with the power and the length bar that we have pretty big trees, but nothing that's like substantial. So luckily this saw can do most of our tree work that we have out here. This is literally the one that I post videos of. It's usually this saw that I'm using out there. Lastly, this is the MS291. Again, just like the 171 bumping up to 271, and just like the 271 bumping up to the 291. It's all engine size. We have an 18-inch bar on here, but we can also throw a 20 to a 22-inch bar if we want to. But like I said, we don't have trees really out there that we would need a bar that size. So this is we decided to go with a little bit bigger than our Farm Boss for those trees that we would have to use. So this one's really nice when we cut the stump down, because typically the stump is the largest part of the tree, diameter wise. So we can cut the tree down with the Farm Boss, get it all limbed up, and then this might be used to stump all the way down to the ground. It's a great tool to have. So those are the chainsaws that we have in our fleet. You always have somebody with you when doing chainsaw work. You never know when an emergency will happen, and if you're in that emergency and you somehow hurt yourself, if you're by yourself, you're pretty much screwed. So always have somebody with you.